Hello, everyone. Welcome to week number 6 in Bio 120. We've got a couple more weeks to go in our course. This week is about genetics and heredity. So let's see what we've got going on. All right, last week was all about DNA, transcription and translation, the cell cycle, learning about the fact that DNA consists of genes, and the genes make proteins, and most of those proteins are enzymes that run all the biochemistry in cells. So we learned about DNA. This week we're going to continue that study, and we're going to look at inheritance, heredity, and some things that control when genes are turned on and off. So we will talk about that next. You have several chapters. I will once again suggest that you skim these chapters so that you know what's in them. Chapter 11 is about meiosis, and that's making sex cells in those organisms that do sexual reproduction. Not all organisms do. Chapter 12 is all about Mendel and inheritance patterns that you know about, you've heard about before, dominant traits, recessive traits, which I'll mention in just a second. And then chapter 47, which is about biodiversity. And why is that important? So even within a species, you've got to have differences between the organisms that are found in a population in case some catastrophic event happens and most of the organisms are susceptible to it, like a disease, for example. So you got to have a lot of genetic diversity in your population in order for at least somebody to survive. This goes for bacteria all the way up to human beings and everything in between. So biodiversity is very important. So that's the topic of chapter 47. Read the Module 6 overview and watch the video, especially the video on epigenetics. That's a very interesting one, and it's very important for this week. All right, the discussions this week. Oh gosh, here I go again. I'm going to move my face over. There we go. Discussion board postings this week. You know the initial posts due by Thursday. The 2 response posts are due by Sunday. Epigenetics. So before we move on, epigenetics means above genetics. So genetics, you have genes in each one of your cells except for red blood cells. But anyway, you have genes in every one of your cells in your DNA that code for every single protein that you need, every single piece of RNA that you need in order to survive as any type of cell in the organism. The important thing is that your cells have to know when to turn on genes and when to turn off genes. And what is the purpose of that cell? That has to be known by the cell, and so certain genes have to be turned on and off in order for that cell to become what it needs to be and to do the job that it needs to have. So epigenetics is terribly important. If we could understand this better than we do right now, just think about the things that we could do. We could turn on genes in cells that are basically asleep. We want to turn them on, like your spinal cord cells. They don't reproduce once they are in place. Your brain cells don't reproduce. Your heart muscle cells do not reproduce. Just think of what we could do if we could turn those cells on to divide and repair damaged cells. On the other hand, if we understood this better, couldn't we turn off the cancer genes that are in our cells? Yes, we could. So the understanding of epigenetics is very important and has wide-ranging applications to lots of things that we understand, and there will be even more than I can even imagine. You'll also discuss nature versus nurture. So nature means, are your characteristics based on the genes that you have, right? Your DNA. When you go to the doctor, what do they always ask you about? Your family history, right? Has anybody in your family ever had heart disease? Has anybody ever had high blood pressure? Has anybody ever had kidney cancer? Has anybody ever had glaucoma? that whole long list. What are they trying to figure out from you? Your genes, your genetic makeup. Do you have a susceptibility to any of these diseases based on your family history? That's your genes. Versus nurture, and that means the environment creates certain characteristics, creates certain conditions out there that could change you as an organism. Environmental contaminants, what you eat, how much you exercise, all of that's part of your environment. Trauma, all part of your environment, right? So what makes you as an individual? What makes a bacterium as that individual? Is it genes or is it environment? Or is it a combination of both? That you can pretty well guess, right? All right, you also have a journal entry this week. How bacteria reproduce. All right, I'm giving you a really good hint here. Go to chapter 22, section 2. There's a whole section on this. It's not very much reading. You need to take a look at this. So there are ways the bacteria reproduce. They reproduce asexually. There aren't male and female bacteria. So you have to understand how they reproduce and how they get new genetic information. That's terribly important. So if they made exact copies of themselves when they reproduce, then there would be no genetic variation in populations of bacteria. And that can't happen because evolution has to happen. When there are environmental pressures, then bacteria and the population of bacteria have to be able to survive. So what kind of reproduction happens? Well, and how can bacteria get new genetic information? First of all, through mutation. And then there are certain other ways. Transformation, conjugation, transduction. You need to look those up to see what they are. You're going to have a discussion about asexual versus sexual reproduction. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each one? That's important. Biodiversity. This is important because, like I said before, you've got to have diversity in a population in order for at least someone in the population to survive. You've got to have differences in the individuals, whether you're talking about a bacterial population or a human population or anything in between. And you're also going to talk about genetic erosion in agriculture because we are selecting certain individuals, certain characteristic in our crop plants, in our livestock, and we keep farming them, right? If you think about tomatoes that you buy, just regular tomatoes in the grocery store, they basically are tasteless, right? But they last a long time on the grocery shelves and they don't get bruised in transit. And so you have tomatoes. They don't really taste good, but you have some tomatoes. Why is that? Because it's better to sell a nice product in the grocery store than it is to have good taste. Yeah. So how can we fix that? One thing that is happening is we are reverting back to heirloom varieties and differences in crop plants, for example. I know one of the produce stands that I visit has heirloom tomatoes, which is awesome because they taste wonderful. They get bruised very easily, but you know, if you go to the produce stand, you take those tomatoes right back home. So that is something to consider. There are also things like seed banks where seeds are kept under very controlled conditions so that we can revisit those plants if we need to in the future. So that's something else that should be considered. And so you get the discussion board postings and the journal entry. You don't have anything due for your final project, but I suggest that you do this. I suggest that you start working on that final project. You need to go back over your milestones and see where I have made comments, where I have given you feedback, and fix those issues. I have already basically graded the parts of your final project. All you're going to have to do is put them together and put them into a slide format for your final project. And your final project counts as a lot of points. So you must be working on this. So work on your slides this week so that in week 7, you don't have that much to do. Okay? All right, I'm going to cover a couple more things about the biology this week. Only if my slides move forward. There you go. No, wrong direction. Lord have mercy. There we go. Genes equal traits. Very important concept. What's a gene? A gene is a little piece of DNA. That's all it is. It codes for a trait. Usually that trait is one protein. One protein that has one job, and that job is in a pathway that makes something happen in you if you're an organism. There are different types of traits. There are in organisms that do sexual reproduction, we see dominant and recessive traits. So I have a few here, like albinism is a recessive trait. There's a little boy who has the albinism, 2 copies of the albinism gene. In the middle picture, we have a picture of a man with Marfan syndrome, and this is kind of poignant to me right now because I have a friend who has a couple who has a son who's just been diagnosed with Marfan syndrome, and he is an older teenager, and I am very worried about him because there are health issues that come along with Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome is a dominant trait. And then we have sickle cell anemia, where the red blood cells sickle out. That's the picture on the right there, and that causes problems. So you see that red blood cell sort of in the middle, that's oval shape. That's the shape the red blood cells should take. And capillaries, the very smallest blood vessels, are just big enough for one of those red blood cells to travel through. If your red blood cells sickle out, like they do in sickle cell anemia under low oxygen conditions, they get stuck on your capillaries, and that means your tissues aren't getting oxygen. That means your tissues can die. So that is a very, very harmful disease to have, and it can be life-threatening. That's a recessive trait. All right, let's see. I swear. Let's see what my other slide was. Epigenetics, turning on and off genes. A very important idea. Because you not only have the genes, but you have to turn them on and off at the correct times, right? Very, very important. And we're just now understanding this. And every single year, we're learning more about epigenetics and how to turn genes on and off. This will be so important in the future. I cannot stress this enough. We know about our DNA now. We have the human genome sequenced. Right? So we know what the DNA looks like. All we have to do now is control it. Turn the genes on and off. That's epigenetics. All right, nature versus nurture. I'm going to link a video about identical twins separated at birth, and I want you to take a look at the 2 women and see. I'll put this in my announcements, of course, and let you look at them and see if you see similarities, differences. This is kind of an interesting idea, isn't it? Because identical twins have exactly the same DNA when they're born. Exactly the same DNA. But does their environment cause changes in them? There's that nurture part, right? And one of my favorite movies. I love old movies. And there's a great one from 1956. Woohoo! That's a good year. That's the year I was born. Tells you how old I am. It's called The Bad Seed. And it's amazing because it's all about nature versus nurture. It's about a little girl named Rhoda. And today we would call her a psychopath. Back then, no one thought that a child could have mental illness, really. Yeah. This kid is a psychopath. And you find out in the movie. And the mother struggles with nature versus nurture. And so do some of the other people in the movie. So watch it. I'm sure you can find it on Prime Video. I don't know where else. Look on Tubi and see, because Tubi is free. Tubi, Tubi. Anyway, give it a check. Check it out. And also on YouTube. YouTube has a lot of old movies on there just for free. So Watch the movie. It is crazy. Yeah, I'm just saying. One of my favorites, though. And it involves the nature versus nurture argument. The importance of sexual reproduction. I put the Duggars on here. Everybody knows who the Duggars are now. I don't know how many kids they ended up with. 19. I can't remember. I don't think this is all of them. But the thing that I want you to realize here is that we have the same two parents, right? And when you look at all the children, they all look different from each other. So even if you have the very same parents, when you're mixing up all the genes from these very same two parents, you're not going to get the same combination. In fact, there are 8 million different combinations of paternal chromosomes and 8 million different combinations of maternal chromosomes. And so when 8 million times 8 million comes together, look at how many differences you could have. Yes, the children look similar, but they are different. And they're different in lots of ways, not just the way that they look. I'll give you another example of this. My sister and I are alike in a lot of ways, but we have some striking biochemical differences. For example, I use sucralose like in my coffee as a sweetener because I don't want to consume too much sugar. So I use sucralose. If my sister tastes a hint of sucralose, to her it tastes like chlorine. Sucralose has chloride ions associated with it, which helps to trick your taste buds into thinking that you're eating sugar. I don't taste that. She does. The other thing, another difference between us biochemically, is that she thinks that cilantro tastes like soap, and I love cilantro. Weird? Yes. We have the same parents. We were raised the same way, but we have definite biochemical differences in our bodies. We look a little bit different too, but that's just to show you that it's not just the looks, it's also biochemical pathways inside of you that are different. All right, so I just wanted to make that point. And let's see what else I've got. Biodiversity, I already mentioned this, but I also want to say that there's all types of biodiversity. So there's genetic biodiversity that's important in populations. There's species biodiversity, and I'm just about to sneeze. Oh goodness, just about to sneeze. Sorry. There's species biodiversity that you need in ecosystems. That's terribly important. There's community biodiversity. There's diversity all the way from the molecules in organisms out to the ecosystems and the biome. You've got to have biodiversity. That keeps everything healthy. That ensures survival. That ensures the health of ecosystems and communities and species and genes. Biodiversity is terribly important. We're destroying biodiversity at a tremendous rate in the world in all different ways. And so take a look at that in that chapter 47. With that being said, I hope that you have a wonderful week number 6. If you need anything, if you have any questions, if you want to talk to me about that great movie, The Bad Seed, just email me. I love that movie. Oh my goodness. Anyway, m.sigmon@snhu.edu. I'm here for you. Let me know if you need anything.